Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to this edition of the Here to Serve podcast. For those of you celebrating Thanksgiving this week, I hope you have a wonderful time with your families and friends, and maybe you'll be spending a little bit of that time on the tennis courts. This edition of the Here to Serve pod is special in that it was recorded recently at our USTA Florida kickoff to our Leadership Academy. We did that earlier this month in Orlando, where we brought in 20 aspiring leaders and we asked them to think of innovative ways to grow tennis, bring in volunteers, apply technology, and just grow the game. As part of that workshop, I was able to sit down with USTA CEO Lew Sherr and talk about why innovation is so key to leadership and some of the ways that we must work as leaders to change the game. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Lew, and please check back in December for the last edition of our podcast, where we'll have a special preview of our 75th anniversary celebration. Happy Thanksgiving, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, Lew. Do you want to talk a little bit about maybe your background and what you used to do at USTA before you became the CEO?
Sure, happy to. I'm not sure whether the square or the circle means I'm the kind of person that really doesn't need a microphone to these things, but I'll do it anyway. So Laura mentioned I've been in this role now for about a year and a half, but I've been a part of the USGA for 13 years. And almost all of that time was spent up in New York, leading the commercial organization that's largely focused on growing and building the U.S. Open and the financial success around the U.S. Open. So that's our broadcast rights business, our sponsorship, our ticket sales, hospitality sales, merchandise sales, all of the revenue generating sort of aspects. And what I will tell you, having worked in a side of the organization that wasn't as closely aligned with the mission, to be a part of an organization that does what we do is incredibly gratifying, right? One of the great, even though I was in a revenue generating, revenue focused role, to be part of an organization that is improving the quality of life for individuals, improving communities, is a great feeling. And I don't know if there are any transplanted New Yorkers in the room, but oh, beautiful. So one of the reasons it felt so good is I came from Madison Square Garden, which is owned by a gentleman named Jim Dolan. And if anyone knows anything about Jim Dolan, it is incredibly gratifying to be part of an organization that has a mission and a purpose that I think is altruistic. I'm not sure that would be the case in my previous employment. But there I led the sponsorship sales team, so that's the Knicks and the Rangers. We did quite well financially. The teams were horrible. At some point we got to turn that around, but I've adopted the magic.
So it's you, basically, is it?
But my career, just for what it's worth, my career out of school, I had this idea that I wanted to work in a category. If I was going to be successful in my professional life, I needed to work in a category that I could be excited about, passionate about, energized about. And I had read a book called What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School, authored by a gentleman named Mark McCormick, who sort of founded the sports marketing industry. And I said, that's it. And we probably won't get to it today, but what I will tell you is I couldn't have been more wrong, because I was 2 years into a career in sports. I started with Wilson Sporting Goods, and I realized I liked the work as much as, I was in the golf industry, as much as being around golf. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the intellectual stimulation, the challenge of growing a business and the like. And so the need to be in sports really became secondary. And then I made a few moves through the media space, first in marketing, and then migrated into a sales role and went from there with both Time Warner and a company called Clear Channel, which is now probably better known as iHeart Media, the radio station owner. But
thank you. Well, you just gave me a really good segue to my first question.
Sure.
So you talked a little bit about your background, but could you tell us about some of the innovative projects that you worked on in your career before you came to USTA?
I'll point out a few, but before I get to before the USGA, I'm going to point to one within my time at the USGA, which maybe is maybe nearest and dearest right now. And for anyone that attended the U.S. Open, this may resonate. This year in particular was the year that I think everybody saw what the fan week experience at the U.S. Open, the week leading up to the U.S. Open, could be. And just to show you that innovation comes from lots of places, can be inspired by lots of places, the whole notion of fan week, that qualifying tournament, which has happened for 50 plus years, but doesn't typically get many fans. It's sort of, we wouldn't open up the grounds or the food and beverage or the retail. It was just kind of happening as a secondary event. I was in a budget discussion and I was looking at line items and I saw we were spending, let's say, $150,000 on Legends stipends to participate in Legends matches during the second week of the tournament. And I asked a question, innocent question. Why are we paying people to play during the second week of the tournament when we've sold all the tickets that we have to sell and everyone's watching the tennis in the stadium? Wouldn't it make more sense to put them into the first week when no one knows who the qualifiers are, and yet people may come out to want to see some of those legends, Andy Roddick and others, sort of play? And that spurred sort of the thinking around, boy, if we're going to grow, we sell all of our tickets, we can extend our duration and start to invest in that week. And we got sort of the year before COVID-19 was the first year we did it. Now we're 4 years in. And I think we had 160,000 people come out for that. It's become a huge part of the Open, and I think now it's an anchor to how we're going to get to 1 million fans, and is one of the great experiences in tennis. And right now it's free of charge to the public and fulfills our mission obligation as well. So more than anything at the USTA, that's one I'll look back on. But we are in Florida. And I spent most of, at least my adult life, living in Princeton, New Jersey. And there's nothing about this that is going to say Panama City Beach spring break. But show of hands, if anyone has come through Panama City. So early in my career, I was working with a .com startup. This is in the late 90s. And in addition to trying to launch an online portal for college students, because college students at the time were really the only people that had access to the internet, we also bought up a lot of the marketing properties that were available on college campuses. And these were like wallboard networks that you would see in dorms, and college newspaper ad placement services. So if you wanted to put ads in 100 colleges around the country, you could make one phone call and they would distribute those and place those. And we bought them primarily because we thought we would use those assets as a way to promote what we were doing. But the largest ad spender in the college newspaper ad placement business was Panama City Beach, promoting spring break as a destination. There we go. So we were looking at this going, boy, we make, they're spending a ton of money with us, but the margins in this business are horrible. There's got to be a way to do something better. And as a group, we spent some time saying, what if we got them sort of out of the newspaper business and created something that would better serve their needs and we could build a business out of? And to make a long story short, we went to them and said, pay us what you've historically paid. We're going to produce a multicolor magazine that we will insert into college newspapers or distribute on campuses around, that will allow you to truly tell the stories. And you can sell pages to your hotels and your bars and lots of bars, all of that. But we can sell ad pages around that as well. And we created a great business out of what was a small margin sort of thing. So for about 3 years, I was a fixture in Panama City Beach. I tried to stay a little off the but anyhow.
That's a great example of, just thinking about something that was always done a certain way and then, doing it in a different way. You and I have sat in a lot of rooms where people talk about leadership, and a lot of words get tossed around on leadership these days that are pretty common. But I find that we rarely hear the word innovation or innovate. Like, those words don't often come up as like, if you're a leader, you must do this, and you must do this well. Why is innovation a pillar of leadership? And how can those of us who are in leadership roles challenge the status quo and current mental models that sometimes are so deeply rooted in our organizations?
I think one of the reasons you don't tend to hear the word innovate or innovation associated with leadership is the terms that get used tend to be personal attributes, right? Charismatic, driven, empathetic, collaborative, whatever the managerial style. But maybe the biggest obligation that any leader of any organization has is to spur innovation and create an environment that not only encourages innovation but makes it safe to innovate, and which means to fail. No business can sustain itself without change over time, and if the goal of a leader is to sustain growth or excellence or success over that is enduring, right? It will require change and often frequent change, and some of that change may be public facing, the product changes or the business changes. Some of it may be the way you engage or recruit employees, retain employees, whatever's required. But the obligation of, I think, the strongest leaders, whether it's military, wherever they're coming from, is to create an environment that spurs innovation, because that is what will fuel success over time, and innovation is linked to culture. I mentioned making an environment that's safe, right? That is about people and culture and creating an environment that encourages innovation, encourages risk-taking, is okay with failure, looks at it as learning, creates a learning organization. All of that, I think, is critical. And the other thing that tends not to happen, you can say all those things and believe all those things, but what you do and what you measure matters. And so from an aspirational standpoint, I look at what we do here at the USTA. We often talk about wanting to innovate, but we measure participation and we measure the U.S. Open attendance and revenues. We measure a lot of things. We don't measure our ability to innovate, our track record innovating, how many failures, those sorts of things. You're going to hear more about that today, I know. But what you measure matters. What you say and do matters. But you don't typically hear innovation with the leader. But I can't think of anything more critical in a leadership role as you think about giving value to the organization. The first boss I had out of school, when I went to work for Wilson Sporting Goods, I was in the golf mart business, and the general manager of the division was a brilliant man who was at the very tail end of his professional career and just wanted to do good work, help others, but said something to me, which is, ask yourself a question every day when you leave. Did you do something to help grow the business, to make the company better, to learn something, right? At the end of the day when you walk out of here, right, what can you look back on and say something positive happened as well? And that sort of mindset across an organization, I think, is really powerful if we can harness it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned sort of what you reward and what you recognize, and I think so many times it's ingrained that we reward success only. Like, if you're successful at this, you get a bonus, or you get this, or you get that. And even the idea of sitting in a room and saying, we tried this, we did this, it does not work, and saying that's a great conversation to have. Like, that in and of itself is the conversation to have. It did not work. Why didn't it work? What do we need to change? What do we need to do differently? You and I were recently at a leadership training, which thank you, by the way, for doing that. You brought in all the senior staff to do this, with an organization called the Thayer Institute, which is incredible. And one of the things that was really eye-opening for me in that training was how important it is to our culture that we develop new leaders from the day they join the organization, that's when the leadership journey starts. Not, well, learn your job and then 3 years later we'll talk to you about becoming a leader. That was very eye-opening to me. What is some advice you would give to this group, everyone in this group, about how they can use this time here today in the Leadership Academy to first lead themselves and then also develop other new leaders?
A little bit of background. So Thayer Institute is a consulting group comprised of former military leaders that go out into sort of the corporate world, nonprofit world, and try to apply principles of leadership from military training and educate on how. I can't think of another organization or organizations, if you look at the different branches, that are as conscious of leadership training as our military. And I think the point you just raised was eye-opening for me, in a sense, that developing leaders isn't just picking out who you think are the exceptional performers and making sure they're moving along a track. Thayer talked about, we bet on everybody, right? Now, we may not make the same bets on everybody, but we bet on everybody, and everyone in the organization needs to think of their job, or think one of the responsibilities in their job is to develop leaders. And that's a different mindset, that part of our role, all of our roles, is to develop our people, that we as an organization need to be an organization that is conscious of developing our people, developing and creating opportunities for them to learn and grow. Interestingly, when I went and spoke to our head of people and culture, right, one of the strongest reasons that people stay in an organization, as much as money and other things sort of come up in those conversations, it's about feeling like they're learning and growing. And so it tends to be a circle, or a virtuous circle. To me, that was really powerful, just to think about, as an organization, are we conscious of how we are developing everybody? And the notion that you're doing it from day one. So the example they pointed to was when someone comes into West Point in their first year, most everywhere else you're freshmen, but there you're a plebe, you're in a room, 3 people in a room. If one of your roommates is late for class, is struggling academically, isn't somewhere they're supposed to be, all 3 are held accountable. And the immediate response is, why am I being held accountable because they didn't go to class? Because when you're in the military and you're in the field, right, you're accountable for everybody and you're accountable to each other. And that training over 4 years and then on is really powerful when you think about everyone in an organization being accountable to one another and being conscious of, right, this is not about gotcha. This is about, we're here to elevate everybody. And so, you know, when we left, we did this event in Dallas. We had the 17 section EDs and all of the senior management team from National together. And when I got back on that flight, I was riding for the entire flight to New York. And I've got pages and pages of inspiration that I took from that, which is, we need to think about ourselves as a learning organization, a leadership development organization. And then you start to realize it's much less expensive to develop your own people than to go out and recruit others, right? You want to retain people. There's so many benefits if you can do it. But they were extraordinary, and it was great to be able to share that with the leadership of the organization.
Yeah, and I thought what was great about that is that the example you just referred to is that when the plebes become sophomores, they actually lead the other freshmen. So it's a 1-year leadership track, basically, that they're on. Learn how to lead yourself and then lead others. And that really was eye-opening to me as well. And I think they also talked a lot about the idea that it's more important the team you're on than the team you lead. That was super powerful. And I asked my team that. I said, which one's more important? And most of us would say the team we lead, right? We think that's our most important role, but it's really, back to you, it's the team you're on and how you're supporting the other members of the team that you're on. Because if we make sure everyone on the team is successful, the team will naturally be successful.
The other piece that stuck with me, and a lot of my career was in sales roles. So I'm conditioned to results, and you hit your numbers, and that's where my focus was. There's a little bit of a triangle, I guess, in me based on the last section. But the idea that in addition to your role, everyone has an obligation to improve the organization. And you would come back from missions, and the first debrief was, what could we have done better? Not, was it a success? Was it not? It was, what could we do better? And everybody's a participant in that. And the best organizations, the best cultures, those that are associated with excellence, everyone involved understands that they have an obligation to try to elevate the organization, elevate their peers, be better, be more efficient, be more, whatever the case may be. And again, if we can create that, that's an unbelievably powerful force.
So one of the last things we did at the training, which was something new for me, and now I am like, I need to do this more, which is they had us write out our leadership philosophies. And one of the things is we might know ourselves and say, well, these are the values that I bring to the table. These are the things that are important to me. But if we never say that out loud, and you can create these sort of odd expectations of like, what is it that you really want from me? So I wanted to know if you would mind sharing some of your leadership philosophies, and are any of them, he said we could have some that are aspirational. I definitely have some aspirational ones. Do you have any that are aspirational?
Sure. At the time, I probably wrote 10 or 12 things. I've tried since, this was about a month ago, I've tried since to distill those down. So one that I've talked about for many, many years is I am team-oriented, and I think this goes back to having played sports as a youth and appreciating the dynamic of being part of a team. Success is better when it's shared. As I think about what we do, it's about working collaboratively. It's bringing, the reason we were all together in Dallas was the notion of creating a stronger sense of team. There's more power that can be unlocked and unleashed with more opinions, more points of view. So my approach tends to be team-oriented, and increasingly now making sure that the teams are constructed in a way that enable more and diverse opinions. It's not teams of people that resemble me. It's actually folks who can challenge my thinking, who can educate me, I can learn more from. And so team orientation was one. Empathetic leadership is another. And maybe some of this goes back to either my sales background or perhaps why I might have been successful in sales. Relationship building has been a part of my career, both internal, external, whatever. My success has been a function of my ability to create trusting and successful sort of working relationships with the folks I need to work with. And that's not manufactured. That's sort of the way I like to work and operate. And so we spend a lot of time together, and that's not a forced interaction. It's just part of the way I like to work. I tend to be accessible. I want to communicate. I want to communicate with more people at more levels in the organization. But being empathetic, being caring, recognizing that everyone that works for the organization, I'm a team member. The notion of boss somehow being different. We're team members. Everyone has different roles. Coaches, quarterbacks, whatever positions. Everyone has a different role to play. They're all critically important. You can't be successful if you have breakdowns. And so my role just happens to be different. But I want to be viewed in that way. One that increasingly for me in this organization is aspirational. Being purpose-led. I mentioned, right, working here is much more gratifying than other places I've worked in my career, and that's because of what we do as an organization. But to be part of an organization where everybody feels like we're a part of something that is bigger than ourselves or our own individual success agenda or family goals or obligations is something that increasingly now is more important to me than ever before as I try to think about how we motivate others. I'm solutions oriented. I tend to look and appreciate folks who look at situations, problems in particular, as opportunities to create something new, to think differently, to turn something into a positive. So solving problems and focusing on solutions as opposed to obstacles and just identifying those, and then accountability. Results matter. And I want to be very clear, and again, most of my career has been either having a P&L or being in sales roles where I had a number to hit. Results absolutely matter. Accountability matters. To deliver those results, everybody should feel invested in that. But how you get to those results also matter, and maybe that goes back to being purpose-led and the like. Are you a part of an organization you can be proud of, or you're carrying yourself in a way that you can be proud of, or you're treating people? And I used to joke with some, I'm as greedy, particularly when I was in sales roles, I'm as greedy as anybody else, but I'm long-term greedy, right? I'm not looking to take advantage of every situation. I'm looking to build successful, positive relationships sort of over time and enduring partnerships in businesses. And I think that comes from carrying yourself in a manner or working in a manner that reflects sort of integrity and honesty, transparency, all of those. But
That's I learned some things now that I didn't know. Lew was at my table there, actually, at the session. I'm glad you mentioned accountability. I learned a lot about that also at the training. And one of the things the speaker said is to be accountable for something means you're going to clean up the mess. And I thought that was like a really succinct way to summarize accountability. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And then you talked about different aspects of accountability and what it means. And so I'm still rolling around with that in my head, but I do know you're a highly accountable person, and I really have thought more about that internally of like, what does that mean and how do you get all of the humans to be accountable and to share that accountability? So my last question for you is, as you look forward to the next few years, what do you think are the biggest challenges we face as leaders in the tennis industry as a whole?
There are a number of challenges. There are new challenges to our industry and the ecosystem. But before I address any of the challenges, I want everyone to understand I have unbelievable optimism about where we sit as a sport and the opportunities for it. If you look at what's happening in America and the resources that we have available to us and the benefits that tennis can deliver to individuals from a longevity standpoint, a health and wellness standpoint, and what that can do for communities, I think we are sitting in an incredible time for our sport, and we're also at a point where we've now gone through 4 years of extraordinary growth. Our participation numbers nationally have increased by 1/3 in the past 3+ years. So tennis is growing, the sport is growing, and it's growing for a lot of reasons. And thankfully, the sport looks like America. There's more we can do there, but the sport is far more diverse than I think people would immediately expect based on the history of our sport. But in terms of challenges, and again, some of these are new given the growth that we've had. We do not have enough tennis facilities in this country to support the demand for play. And depending on where you are, that may mean indoor facilities and the like. And we are getting squeezed by the value of real estate in dense population areas that are starting to make tennis less viable financially in those markets and pushing us further out, which makes it even less accessible and more challenging. So we have a big facility challenge. USGA has a lot of resources. Laura mentioned we fund 17 sections or a portion of their operating budgets. We fund many things. The US Open generates enormous proceeds that help go to grow the game. When you start thinking about changing the landscape of facilities in America, we don't have that type of money. That's billions of dollars, right? In the millions, we tend to be pretty good. But at $100,000 a court, right? $1 billion even doesn't go that far when you start to think about, have I changed access to tennis in America? So it's going to force us to be resourceful. How do we take advantage of school courts? How do we take advantage of pickleball courts that are being built? And those courts are just exacerbating the issue that we have as people start to find it's cheaper to just flip a tennis court as opposed to build a new pickleball court. But we have a host of facilities challenges, and figuring out how to create public-private partnerships will be the solution there. Coaching. There are not enough coaches in the country to support the demand for play. The coaches that we do have don't look like America, so not everyone can see themselves in the game. And we don't have all of the coaches sort of purpose-built for the appropriate level. So if you think about youth soccer or Little League baseball, typically the people you would identify as coaches are parent volunteers at the early stages. Tennis doesn't really have that dynamic, and so we're taking skilled coaches out of what they should be doing and putting them into situations where really they may be over-designed for what needs to happen, which is how do I just engage a 4 or 5-year-old and make it fun and keep them going. So we have a big opportunity if we can recruit more coaches into the sport, or get them appropriately placed, High performance is one area of the spectrum. Volunteer coaches for early starters, beginners at another level. Making sure we have enough diversity with the coaches that we have. I think all of that is an area that we can do more as the USTA to support coaches in the country. Leveraging technology, right? Our ability to grow the game, and I've said this before, my phone's too far to reach, will be as tied to how we deliver tennis through the phone as it is on the court. Making sure that you as players, you coaches, facility owners can connect to others. How do I find someone to hit with? How do I find a place to take a lesson? How do I find, did you know there's a clinic this week? Did you know there's a program? There's a pro event, whatever the case may be. How do we connect folks who are interested in our sport? And how can we as the USTA use technology to help facilitate all of that interaction and communication and serve information, the right information at the right time, not just everything we know about tennis going out to the same people, right, on a weekly basis. You're interested in pro events, you're interested in educational content, how can I improve my serve, whatever that may be, we need to do that. I've got a few other things, but the last one I'll say is, we also have to free ourselves up as an organization with 17 sections and a national to get out of our own way. At times, there's so much history, there's so much formality and process, and sometimes that can be a challenge with innovation. You want to test new things, you want to learn, but then you have bylaws and regulations and all sorts of things, and we don't free ourselves up to make it as fun as it could be to be in the sport, a part of the sport. And I think there's more that can happen there, but that only comes when there's sufficient trust that folks are willing to with grace and latitude to allow folks to experiment a little more. So.
I think we're out of time. I'm so sorry. So Lew, thank you so much for joining us. You're such a pleasure.
You.
That's all for this edition of USTA Florida's Here to Serve podcast. For more episodes of the podcast, including upcoming topics, guests, and dates, please visit USTAFlorida.com/here to serve. Thank you for tuning in and have a wonderful day.